Today, we're diving into something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's totally real. It's this idea that time, well, it doesn't tick by at the same speed for every single creature on this planet.
I want you to really stop and think about that for a second. Could your life, right now, the way you're walking, talking, everything, could that all be playing out in what looks like extreme slow motion to another animal?
And look, this isn't just some crazy thought experiment. To a common housefly, you trying to swat it is basically a scene from The Matrix. The fly sees that newspaper coming with such high-resolution vision that it unfolds in what to us would feel like agonizingly slow detail. It has all the time in the world to just casually buzz away.
All right, let's get into it. Here's what we're going to cover today. We'll start with what it actually means to live in slow motion. Then we'll check out the biological clock that's pulling the strings. After that, we've got two amazing case files, one on how an ant's memory works and another on a fly's visual superpowers. And then we'll put it all together to see this incredible world of different times.
Okay, first up, living in slow motion. Let's really get our heads around this idea that the river of time can flow at totally different speeds. So here's the key. An animal's sense of time isn't magic. It's all about biology. Specifically, how fast its brain can process information from its senses. The best way to think about it is like a camera's frame rate. If you have a really high frame rate, you're capturing more individual pictures of the world every second. And from your perspective, that makes everything else seem to move slower. So, what's the science behind this? Well, let's take a look at the biological clock and the main hypothesis that tries to explain it all. And here it is, the big aha moment. It all seems to come down to two things: an animal's size and its metabolism. The smaller the animal is, and the faster its metabolism is burning through energy, the more frames per second its brain processes. And the more frames you see, the slower the rest of the world appears to be. You can see this huge spectrum of experience right here. Down at one end, you've got larger animals with slower metabolisms, like lizards. They're processing fewer frames of reality. Then you have cats and dogs somewhere in the middle, but way up at the other end, you have flies. They're living life at an incredibly high-speed resolution, which of course explains their absolutely infuriating ability to dodge everything we throw at them. Okay, but this begs a pretty huge question, right? You can't just ask an ant what time it is. So how in the world do scientists measure something so internal? Well, this puzzle has led to some unbelievably clever experiments. And that brings us to our first case file. We're going to start with a really ingenious study on a species of ant called Myrmica sabuleti, and it all has to do with how they forget things. So instead of trying to measure time directly, which is basically impossible, scientists got clever. They decided to use a stand-in, or a proxy, memory. The logic is actually beautiful. How quickly an ant forgets something it learned can be a window into its own internal clock. It's a brilliant way to peek inside the mind of an insect. So here's how they set it up. The researchers trained these ants to connect a specific cue. It could be a scent like time or a visual marker like a little colored rectangle with a safe entrance to their nest. This creates a really strong, dependable memory for the ant to draw on.
The whole process was super methodical. First, they built up that memory by rewarding the ants over and over for finding the right cue. Then, they just took the cue away completely. And finally, over many hours, they'd test the ants in a little Y-shaped maze to see if they still remembered which path used to have the cue.
And the results were not what you might expect. You see, the ant's memory didn't just fade away slowly in a straight line. Nope. It stayed super strong for hours, and then it just collapsed really suddenly. This S-shaped curve tells us that in an ant's brain, there's a clear tipping point between a recent memory and an old one. It's like a switch just flips.
Okay, but this is where things get really, really weird. The scientists decided to throw in a curveball. They thought, what happens if we make the ants work a little harder during that memory fading period? And look at this. To make the ants work harder, they just added a little ramp to their nest and moved their food farther away. And when they did that, the ants' strong memory lasted way, way longer. That sudden drop-off point was pushed back by hours compared to the ants that had an easier time. So let that sink in for a second. Because they were more physically active, the ants behaved as if less time had gone by. Their physical effort literally warped their perception of time. It slowed down their internal clock. For an ant, a hard day at the office actually makes time seem to pass more slowly. Incredible. All right, now let's switch gears from an ant's memory to the amazing visual system of the fruit fly. This is our second case file, and it's just as wild.
Okay, so get this. When a fly is walking around, it's constantly using what it sees to navigate. But what scientists figured out is that it's actually running two different computer programs in its brain at the exact same time, one for steering and a totally separate one for speed. The first program is called temporal frequency tuning, or TF tuning. You can think of this one as the pattern detector. It pays really close attention to things like how far apart stripes are in the fly's field of view. For a long time, this was the main theory for how flies figure out which way to turn.
But the second program is called speed tuning. This one doesn't really care about the pattern at all. It's all about pure speed. How fast is the world moving past me? This is absolutely vital for judging distance. You know when you're in a car and nearby trees fly by, but distant mountains barely move? That's your brain using speed cues, not pattern cues, and that's exactly what the fly is doing.
This is the perfect way to picture it. On one side, you've got TF tuning. That's the steering wheel. It's all about pattern. On the other side, you have speed tuning. That's the gas pedal. It's all about raw velocity. The fly's brain is doing both of these calculations at the same time with the exact same visual info.
It's honestly like having two different apps running in its tiny brain. One app for steering, which uses pattern detection, and another app for the accelerator, which uses speed detection. This is what allows a fly to do something sophisticated, like automatically slow down as it gets closer to a wall so it doesn't crash.
And what's just wild, as this quote points out, is that these two very different programs are running on the same shared hardware. Key neurons in the fly's brain are being used for both jobs, even though the jobs themselves are computationally totally different. It is the ultimate in biological efficiency.
So what's the big picture here? When you take the time-bending ant and the dual-processing fly, what's the final verdict on how different animals really experience the world?
So let's just pull all this together. What have we learned? Well, for one, time isn't some fixed thing. It's a biological variable tied to things like size and metabolism. And incredibly, an animal's own actions can actually change how it perceives time. We've also seen that a single brain can run totally different software for different jobs. And all of these abilities are just incredibly fine-tuned tools for survival.
And look, this isn't just some weird animal trivia. These ideas have huge implications for how we understand our own brains. We know that in humans, our internal clock isn't perfectly steady either. It can be sped up or slowed down by chemicals in our brain, especially the neurotransmitter dopamine.
For example, this has led to a really interesting working hypothesis for some aspects of ADHD. Now, the theory goes something like this. If reduced dopamine levels cause a person's internal clock to run a bit slower, then the outside world can feel, well, boring and understimulating. And this might help explain some impulsive behaviors, as sort of an unconscious attempt to generate more stimulation and speed things up. It's a really fascinating area of ongoing research.
And so that leaves us with one last kind of profound thought. We saw that for an ant, something as simple as walking up a ramp can totally change how it experiences time. So it makes you wonder, what subtle things, your mood, how focused you are, your own body chemistry, are shaping and maybe even warping your personal perception of reality right here in this very moment?